Hey everybody, welcome back to Nerding Out with Jake, and this is episode 4 where I'll be covering filters, washes, and oils while I work on the FINNISH T-34 85. Let's get started. First things first, I'll be identifying the filters I'll be using for the filtering portion of this tank. I go about adding a lighter green filter for a sun-bleached effect, and also a lighter grayish green tone to actually add a little more emphasis to the green color. You'll notice I thin my filters quite a bit because I like to keep them pretty thin. I believe that you can always add more and it's harder to take off too much. If you've added too much, I mean. So I just go about adding a little more of the thinner, and I go about adding more and more to the tank as I see fit. Once the hull of the turret is done, I then go up to the turret and do the same process. This is a process that doesn't really have an end point. You can always go back and add more. It makes it that much easier to just work with, especially the enamel products and oil products. Now, this is a second kind of filter I enjoy using. It's called a dot filter. I go about adding little dots of oil paint. In this case, it's yellow. Then I'll use a white or even other colors if I really want to. And I go and I blend it. I'll use a more of a wet or slightly dampened brush and go out in up and down streaky motion. You'll notice that here and there it looks like it's going to be a little too much, but once you bring in a drier brush and blend it that way, it blends. Well, yeah, it blends, but it actually really fades into the paint pretty well. It makes more of a natural look, as if the paint's been exposed to different elements and is weathered. And then at this point, I go onto the hull and do the exact same thing. Again, I bring in a slightly moistened brush, do the up and down strokes, and then come back behind that with an entirely dry brush and do the exact same type of stroke method. Up and down motion, and also more of a patting motion on the more of the horizontal surfaces. So up and down for the vertical, and patting motion for the horizontal surfaces. The effect is pretty subtle, but it adds a richness to the different tones around the tank. And once it all dries out, since I am using mineral spirits, it flattens the color out quite a bit, and it really does a great job blending everything together, so it doesn't look quite like a toy. After I was done adding some blends, I wanted to go about and add a little bit more brightness to the tops of the tank, so I took the white oil brusher back out and did the same thing over again. Nothing too big here, just the same process. You can always add different colors in later on if you're not totally satisfied, but I just want to make the fenders, the top of the hull of the tank, and also even the hatches and stuff stand a little bit more out than the other portions of the tank. I've had a couple people ask me before, how often do I seal the model? I really don't. Once the initial base coat's done with, I will I will add a clear coat over the model after I put the decals on, just to protect the decals. But from this point onwards, I don't use any more clear coats because I like to have everything blend. So I did add the filters, waited about 24 hours, and I went and applied the oils. And sometimes I get a little bit of a mixing going on between the oils and the filters, but that's fine. It all blends in really nicely. And at this point now you can see I start using the wash, and I've only waited maybe about half a day or so. And if a little bit comes off when I'm using the washes and the thinner, that's fine. It all blends nicely together, and I like that effect. And it doesn't really bother me too much. Here I'm letting the capillary action work with my washes. I really thin them out a bit. Not too much, but just enough to really let the wash flow in the details, as you can see here. If you didn't add enough thinner, it wouldn't flow as well. And, I'm just letting the wash do the work for me and really get around those details. It makes it easier to do, a lot faster. It also makes cleanup a little easier after I come back with a brush with a little bit of mineral spirits on to clean it up. And here we are, we have the wash all set in place. I'll give it a little bit of time to dry. Now it's time to come back and clean up with some mineral spirits. I like to use a little more of a larger brush, but the good point on it to get in the recesses and remove anything I need to, and just go from there. I'll actually unload the brush with the paper towel. As you see, I go off the camera here, tap it, come back, and then rinse and repeat, and just basically clean it up. I really need to stop using the word basically. It's a... it sucks. I'll be getting better about it though, but that's just you can take a shot every time I say that word. Go for it. Maybe I'll start including a basically counter on every one of my videos, but yeah, we'll try to stop it. Nip in the bud. Cleanup can be a little bit tedious, but just make your peace with it and go from there. And after this, it's time for some ambient occlusion. What the heck is ambient occlusion? Well, it's a good way to pop contrast in a model. You take light paints and some darker paints, and you emphasize the darker creases, especially along the fender there, like along the barrel, the hatches especially, and then you create the contrast by adding the darker paints around the recesses and the shadow areas, and the lighter paints will actually accent the higher points, the portions that are more exposed on the tank. This is a great way to really pop the details of the model once the wash has been on there, and it's a pretty simple process. I like to apply the oil paints a little thinner at this point, and then get the details I want to, and come back in with a slightly dampened brush, blend them in just like I was using the oil dot method, get them in there, then come back with a completely dry brush and just really work it in there and just pat it down. It doesn't look as noticeable at first, but as you build the effect up, it looks great. And if you have to, you can always go back in with the washes again and re-emphasize them, but that a lot of times it won't be the case, but that's personal preference. And here you can see the ambient occlusion effects coming in with the darker color paint around the hatches. I really want to create that look that it is, more worn with the crew up on top. And now you can see them work in the higher areas with the lighter paint. Same process as getting the different areas that are more dark and in the recesses, but just using lighter paints. And the joy of using oil paint is that if you mess up, take some thinner, you can just rework it again. And you can always blend them further and further the more you work them too. And here you can see the before and after effect between the turret and the hull. The turret has a lot of contrast, a lot of really good depth to it, and now I'll repeat the exact same process on the hull of the tank. And that's all for episode 4. Thanks again for watching. I hope you had some fun watching this, and in the next episode, episode 5, I'll be covering my favorite portion of working on takes, chipping. So, until next time, have a great one. Feel free to like and subscribe to the video, and check out the Michigan Toy Soldier blog. Again, have a great one. See you next week.